Hello everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode in our AI and You podcast series. Today is Monday, August 3rd, 2020, and I'm your host, Vicar Saidi. I'm a computer scientist and engineer, and I'm also the author of several books. My most recent book is about artificial intelligence and is titled The Genome Affair. The Genome Affair is a work of speculative fiction. It examines what the world might be like if some of the more extraordinary capabilities forecast to be realized in AI over the next 20 or 30 years were actually realized today. The book has a particular focus on the impact AI is expected to have on world affairs and has been very well received. The book is available in ebook format for those who prefer to read on a digital device, but it's also available in a high-quality paperback edition. The Genome Affair is available on Amazon, so I hope you'll take the time to read it and to leave a review. Book reviews are very helpful for writers. And now, on to today's podcast. In our last podcast, episode 3, I shared a closer look into DeepMind's experience with AlphaGo. I felt having a deeper insight into AlphaGo would be worthwhile, since it gives us pause to reflect upon just how powerful narrow artificial intelligence has already become. I also shared a few somewhat more disconcerting examples about how narrow AI is being used today in state surveillance. Today I'll dedicate the entirety of this podcast to the profound impact these powerful technologies are having on societies that possess them and those that do not. Let's get started. As I was preparing my notes, I was reminded of the great British statesman Winston Churchill. Although he was not my favorite character from history, Churchill was certainly one of the more insightful. Regarding history, Churchill said, "The farther back you can look, the further forward you are likely to see." With this thought in mind, perhaps it would be wise to begin today with a brief review of the first industrial revolution and see what it might tell us about what humankind can expect as we stand at the precipice of the fourth industrial revolution. So let's review how we got where we are today. Let's reflect briefly on the first industrial revolution and how it unfolded upon the world stage. The first industrial revolution was an extraordinary event. It changed the course of human history like few episodes had previously managed. Up until that time, the cognitive revolution of 70,000 years ago and the agricultural revolution of 12,000 years ago were the only comparably impactful episodes. The genesis of steam engines in the coal mines of early 18th century Britain ushered in an era of mechanization that for the first time in human history enabled our species to overcome our limitations on human strength. Now, also for the first time, humankind could undertake mechanized farming, which eventually freed people to move to the cities and join the proletariat, the new working class. There they would work with the aid of machines to build things in factories. Before mechanization, 90% or more of the population worked in agricultural occupations of one form or another to produce food for the society. In comparison, today, only 2% of Americans are involved in food production. Such is the impact of the first industrial revolution. For the entirety of human history, up until this first industrial revolution, politics was predominantly about land. Those with the requisite power and skill used their abilities to secure land and join the aristocracy, while those that remained behind joined the ranks of the peasants. But following the first industrial revolution, land became less important, and to the fore came a political battle to control the means of production and the capital to enable this production. This time, those with the requisite political skills and social leverage became capitalists and industrialists, whereas those lacking in these skills joined the ranks of the proletariat, the new working class. Although the Industrial Revolution began in the coal mines of Britain, there were a few countries in the world that were well positioned to rapidly industrialize in their own right. These included France, Germany, Japan, and the United States. Over time, these leaders and pioneers of the first Industrial Revolution grew dramatically in wealth and eventually were able to leverage this wealth to become imperial powers. Subsequently, they subjugated the entirety of the Asian and African continents. But how exactly did this transpire? How did this small number of countries rapidly become industrial and then imperial powers, while the rest of the world was essentially paralyzed and hence subjugated? After all, Asia was the wealthiest continent from the time of ancient Rome up until the late 18th century. As late as 1775, 80% of world GDP was consolidated in Asia, with China and India accounting for 66%. From the time of ancient Rome, gold and silver flowed from Europe to Asia as payment for the chintzes, cottons, indigo dye, silks, and other fabrics and spices of Asia. It's probably a very involved discussion with numerous factors playing direct and indirect roles. Perhaps several books are required to comprehensively explain how this transpired. Nevertheless, it's worth briefly examining this history so we can have some idea of what might happen as we witness the dawn of the Fourth Industrial Revolution led by artificial intelligence. About 1450, Johannes Gutenberg of Mainz, in the southwest of what is today Germany, had perfected his printing press. It was in commercial service in Northern and Western Europe, and only a few decades later, it played a crucial role in Martin Luther's Protestant Reformation. Luther's lectures and theses were translated and widely distributed in the vernacular of the peoples of Northern and Western Europe, the very communities that had adopted the printing press. The communities of Central, Eastern, and Southern Europe did not readily adopt the printing press, and they remained under the firm control of the theologians within the Catholic Church. Clerical influence and control over the peoples of Northern and Western Europe was considerably less potent. As I mentioned previously, it was the British who first developed the steam engine in the northeast of England in about 1712. But because of Gutenberg's printing press, technical know-how, as well as political, scientific, theological, and so much other knowledge spread very rapidly to those who had acquired the printing press. These were essentially the communities in the north and northwest of Europe. Gutenberg's printing press functioned something like today's internet. The dissemination of knowledge to communities who possessed this Renaissance-era technology quickly learned and adapted to all the emerging technologies and sciences of the time, while those who were not connected to this internet fell behind at a very rapid pace. In the case of the people of Asia, from the Far East to the Near East to the subcontinent of South Asia, everyone was comfortable and confident in their near 2 millennia of extraordinary success, and were predictably disinterested and oblivious to the extraordinary developments in ideas and thoughts, military, strategic, and tactical advancements, scientific and technological prowess now coalescing in Europe. The military strategies and tactics refined over decades of sectarian conflict, Austrian wars of succession, and the Spanish Civil War produced a dangerous new enemy for Asia and Africa in the European, and they were wholly unprepared for the imperial storm of colonization to come. But when that storm came, it was unstoppable. The second critical phase of the Industrial Revolution brought electricity, and this also transformed human life in an extraordinary way. The third dramatically transformative phase, the third Industrial Revolution of the Information Age, brought information and computing power to each of us, first through desktop computers and laptop machines, then via smartphones and tablets, all connected via the Internet of the late 20th century. Now, residing at the very top of the hierarchy of human achievement rests the fourth Industrial Revolution. It is likely to be the most transformative phase when compared to the previous revolutions combined, and by an immeasurable margin. This revolution is characterized by the rise of artificial intelligence and a suite of closely related and enabling technologies, sciences and technologies, that may well result in the permanent bifurcation of humanity into two distinct species, those significantly enabled by AI and those that are not. The enabling sciences and technologies I've just mentioned include artificial intelligence, powered by rapidly advancing knowledge of cognitive and neuroscience, biotechnology, enabled by rapidly advancing knowledge of human genetics, bioengineering, and the understanding of evolutionary biology, computing, both classical computing as well as the emerging quantum computing, and data science. ABCD: artificial intelligence, biotechnology, computing, and data science. Today, there are only 2 countries in the world that possess the knowledge of the complete suite of sciences and technologies required to power this fourth industrial revolution. These are China and the United States. A few countries, France, Germany, Japan, South Korea, and the United Kingdom, possess only some of the enabling components. Once again, a very large part of Asia, including Central Asia, the Near and Middle East, and the entire continent of Africa, the Indian subcontinent, and South America possess little to none of the requisite science and technology to participate in this fourth industrial revolution. This is very frightening, since it is unlikely that those who do possess this knowledge and capability will behave in an egalitarian manner towards those who don't. Certainly, if history is any guide, as Churchill alluded, the have-nots will once again suffer tremendously, and perhaps like never before. In this fourth industrial revolution, we are witnessing extraordinary transformation in the public equity markets. In her new book, Don't Be Evil, Rana Foroohar of the Financial Times writes that today, 80% of market capitalization in the public equity markets rests with just 10% of the companies listed on the exchange, most of them directly tied to this fourth phase of the Industrial Revolution. These companies include Amazon, Apple, Facebook, Google, and Microsoft. These are the companies who are the recipients of most of the intellectual property rights being awarded annually. We are quietly observing a transition in Western administrations and legislatures away from debate around capital and the means of production, and increasingly in the direction of data and the other AI-enabling technologies. There is growing concern, particularly in Europe, as to how we can manage this suite of killer apps, ethically and morally. We are witnessing questions of data ownership and privacy, state surveillance, surveillance capitalism, and the violation of human rights. We have entered a new era, and it is transforming, or perhaps more accurately, it is causing an alarming rate of upheaval in society, and it's happening in a way we are wholly unprepared to deal with. We are witnessing a chaotic and disheveled attitude amongst the electorate as they reject truths, data, evidence, facts, logic, reason, and science, the very truths that have brought humankind to the level of achievement we enjoy today. and instead seeking out the nationalist strongman, the demagogue, who preys upon their most visceral fears while promising to take them back in time to a nostalgic age where they were once presumably comfortable and successful. These leaders have no vision for the future and no way to go back to the past either. So there is nothing but difficulty ahead without a reorientation of governance on the world stage. So this fourth phase, this arrival of artificial intelligence, is really a time for humanity to pause and reflect upon what has happened. As previously mentioned, the beginning of the Industrial Revolution was extraordinary and momentous because it was the first time humankind was able to overcome its limitations due to physical strength as a result of mechanization. But this fourth phase, this latest phase, will enable humankind to overcome the limitations of its intellect. Homo sapiens differ from their closest genetically equivalent species, the chimpanzee, by just a few percent, somewhere between 1 and 2%. But this small margin was enough to leave the chimpanzee marginalized in matters that might concern their well-being. To the maximum degree it is possible to be marginalized. That is to say, the chimpanzees had no say whatsoever. But now that the dawn of the age of artificial intelligence is upon humankind, what will it mean to our species when we realize that this artificial intelligence is superior to ours and by an incalculable order of magnitude? We are rapidly progressing towards a new world order, a world with two dramatically different spheres of influence. We are witnessing the genesis of a new Cold War, anchored by an increasingly authoritarian China in the East, home to what many thought leaders consider to be the world's first comprehensive surveillance state, and America in the West, characterized by its own surveillance capitalism, and to a lesser but no less worrisome degree, a surveillance state, as we learned from Edward Snowden's leaks in 2013. The rest of the nation-states throughout the world will be relentlessly lobbied by these two ideologically polarized and decoupled technological powerhouses, with the goal of drawing them into their respective orbits or spheres of influence. The key enabler of each of these increasingly influential spheres of power is the defining characteristic of the fourth phase of the Industrial Revolution, specifically artificial intelligence. When DeepMind's narrow AI, AlphaGo, defeated Lee Sedol in 2016, it was a somber and transformative moment for the Chinese government. Go was a game played and revered amongst Chinese society for 4 millennia, and it's deeply woven into the culture of this civilization. Given China's history and subjugation to British rule in the 19th century, to once again see a British company, DeepMind, strike so close to home was a wake-up call. In 2017, standing before an audience of world leaders, China's president, Xi Jinping, announced that China would achieve parity in artificial intelligence with the United States by 2025, and would plan to eclipse the US and the world in AI by 2030. The loss in the match to Lee Sedol was a blow to the Chinese psyche that is difficult for Western minds not familiar with Chinese history, particularly its recent colonial past, to grasp. Many in Asia and Africa have tasted the bitterness of colonialism, but very few have made the commitment of never again. During the past 2.5 years, China's progress in artificial intelligence, computing, and data has been nothing short of astounding. They now have 18 unicorns, $1 billion startup companies, of which 5 are probably worth $5 billion each, and they are now among the world leaders in facial recognition software and e-commerce. China is likely to emerge as a world leader in other categories very soon as well. It's an extraordinary achievement in just 2.5 years. I'll talk more about artificial intelligence and their surveillance state, surveillance capitalism, and the fourth industrial revolution in our next episode of the podcast, episode 5. Thank you for spending some time with me. I'm trying to follow the TED Talk format, and so I'm keeping these podcasts to about 20 minutes. Let me know what you think. I hope you'll find these insights into artificial intelligence helpful, and I do hope you'll read my new book, The Genome Affair. Until next time then, this has been the AI and You podcast with author Vicar Saidi.